if you spend any time reading or thinking about conscious expansion, you inevitably run into these two really big concepts. They often get tossed around almost interchangeably: awakening and enlightenment.
Right, and that causes a lot of confusion.
Definitely. And we're not talking about small changes here. We mean like the kind of transformations where your whole foundation shifts.
Absolutely. The veil lifts, reality itself seems to change.
But the question becomes, is awakening just, a sort of enlightenment light? Or is one needed for the other? It's murky.
You really can be.
So today we're doing a deep dive. We want to use the material we've gathered to really draw some clear lines between these two milestones.
Yeah, let's get specific.
We want to understand the definitions, sure,
Yeah.
but also the actual journey. How do you get from that first insight to, well, the final stable realization?
And that's the key, I think, that stability. As many teachers point out, the core difference often comes down to permanence. Awakening is often described as that initial glimpse of truth. A powerful recognition, yes, but maybe not steady.
Right.
Whereas enlightenment, that's seen as the full, stable, permanent embodiment of that truth.
Like the difference between seeing a flash of lightning.
Exactly. And living in constant daylight. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so let's unpack that initial flash then. What exactly defines awakening? What's happening when that veil actually, lifts?
Well, awakening is essentially the recognition, and it can be sudden or can creep up on you, that the identity you thought you were.
The story of me.
Precisely. The ego, your conditioning, all those thoughts racing through your head. That's not your true essential self. It's the point where you realize, wow, reality is much, much bigger and stranger than I assumed.
And for someone listening, maybe they're wondering, have I had a moment like that? What are the specific signs? These aren't just small aha moments, are they?
No, generally not. They tend to be quite powerful, sometimes even unsettling. You might suddenly feel this overwhelming sense of interconnectedness, like you're not separate, you're part of this huge, unified whole.
In day-to-day life?
It can gain this heightened clarity, presence. Things just seem more vivid, more real.
I find the psychological shifts really interesting, like the dissolving of that deep fear of death or loss.
Yes, because that fear is usually tied to the body-mind identity, the temporary self.
And if you realize that's not the core of who you are,
then the fear loses its grip. Exactly.
Fascinating.
And often this recognition just bubbles up as spontaneous joy or peace or this unconditional love that doesn't need a reason. It just is.
No external trigger needed.
But it's important to say, while some people get this like a bolt from the blue, maybe triggered by a crisis or near death or just grace, for many others, it's a more gradual unfolding through things like meditation, deep inquiry, study.
Okay, but here's the catch, isn't it? Whether it's sudden or gradual, awakening is often described as just that, a glimpse.
It's a very common way it's framed, yes.
It opens the door, shows you the vastness beyond your thoughts, but then the door often swings shut again. It fades.
It often does. It comes and goes. The recognition is undeniable when it's there, but it hasn't fully stabilized yet.
It's, like you said, seeing the sun briefly.
Only to find yourself back in the familiar shadows of the ego. It's a start, a crucial one, but usually not the end of the story.
Okay, so if awakening is that temporary glimpse, that flash, this is where it gets really interesting. How does enlightenment go beyond that? What makes it stick?
Enlightenment is framed as the state of abiding. It's the complete, stable realization of your true nature.
So that spacious awareness isn't intermittent anymore.
Exactly. It's described as a lasting, unshakable shift in your fundamental identity and how you perceive everything. It's not coming and going. It is.
That sounds like, well, true freedom. If someone is abiding there permanently, what are the defining features? What does that look like or feel like?
Well, first and foremost, the sources say it's permanent freedom from identifying with the ego, the conditioned mind. That whole mechanism just doesn't run the show anymore.
And that leads to?
An unshakable inner peace. Regardless of what's happening outside, you could win the lottery or face a terrible loss. The underlying peace remains untouched.
Wow.
There's also typically deep compassion and love for all beings, naturally arising, and the illusion of being a separate self, that's seen through, completely dissolved.
So you're just living fully aligned with truth, moment by moment.
That's the description. No filter of a separate me interpreting reality, just direct experience.
That's a really powerful contrast. The source material gave some great analogies to nail down this difference between the glimpse and the permanent state.
Yes, those are helpful.
If we synthesize it, what's the core difference in those analogies?
One powerful one is the house analogy. Awakening is like opening the windows. You let in light, fresh air, you see outside.
But the house is still there.
Right. The structure, the walls of the self, they remain. Enlightenment in this analogy is when the walls themselves disappear. There's just open space, no house.
And technically, it seems to boil down to this idea of integration, doesn't it?
It really does. Awakening often kicks off this, frankly, messy and difficult work of integration.
Figuring out how to live your normal life with this completely abnormal perspective.
Exactly. And dealing with the fact that the insight might fade. How do you navigate that? Enlightenment, being described as permanent, doesn't require that kind of integration.
Because the separate self that would need to integrate.
It's simply gone. It's not a temporary state needing to be managed.
So the quick summary. Awakening is the spark.
And enlightenment is the steady fire.
That really helps clarify it. Now, does this kind of terminology, spark versus fire, glimpse versus abiding, hold up across different traditions? If we look at, say, Buddhism or Hinduism.
Well, they definitely use different words, different labels, but the underlying pattern, the trajectory, it's remarkably consistent.
Okay, like in Buddhism?
In Buddhism, you often see a distinction between bodhi, which translates closely to awakening, the realization of truth, and nirvana.
Which is enlightenment.
Yes,
Yeah.
typically understood as enlightenment. The total cessation of suffering, complete liberation. Bodhi is the insight. Nirvana is the final, stable state.
And in Hinduism, particularly Advaita Vedanta.
Very similar pattern. They might talk about the initial recognition of the self, Brahman, as an awakening. But true enlightenment, or moksha, is abiding as that self, permanently, without ever again mistaking yourself for the temporary mind or body.
It's about stability again.
Always. Even if you look into, say, Christian mysticism, there are parallels. An initial experience of divine grace might be seen as the awakening moment.
The turning point.
The turning point, yes. And full union with God, unio mystica, that's the destination. The complete realization.
So different words.
Different language, different cultural contexts, but the core idea seems universal in these paths. Awakening is the crucial turning point, the glimpse. Enlightenment is the stable destination.
Okay, so if awakening is just the spark, the beginning, then there must be this whole journey, potentially a long and winding one, between that first glimpse and the stable fire of enlightenment.
Absolutely. It's usually not instantaneous.
Our sources map this out, often talking about stages. I think the Buddhist maps are particularly detailed here, and they emphasize it's not always neat and linear.
No, definitely not linear. And knowing about these potential stages is really vital, because that initial bliss of awakening, it's often followed by periods of real disorientation, confusion, even darkness.
Map helps you navigate.
Exactly. It helps make sense of the dissolution process, which can be scary otherwise.
Okay, let's quickly detail those 4 stages mentioned. The first stage sounds like it starts with that partial dissolution of identity.
Right. You realize, okay, I'm awareness, not just my thoughts or body. This brings huge relief, maybe bliss expansion.
What?
But it's often coupled with these intense cycles. Emptiness, deep grief, as old attachments loosen, old traumas surfacing.
So you can feel incredibly joyful and utterly lost almost at the same time.
Paradoxically, yes. That's very common in stage 1.
Then the second stage, attention shifts.
Attention naturally starts noticing the mechanics of suffering itself. You see the patterns of craving, aversion, how the mind creates problems.
So attachments start to loosen more seriously.
They do, which brings more freedom. But this is also where that sense of meaninglessness can really hit hard.
Why then?
Because all the old goals, the ego-driven motivations that used to power your life, get the promotion, buy the thing, get the approval, they suddenly feel hollow, trivial.
So you're freer, but potentially adrift for a while.
Potentially, yes. A dark night of the soul phase is common here.
Okay, the third stage. This sounds like where things get deeply non-dual.
Yes. You develop the capacity to turn towards all experience, even the really difficult stuff, without resistance. You stop fighting reality.
And insights deepen.
Deep insights into the non-dual nature of reality arise. The boundaries we take for granted, self and other, inside and outside, even good and bad start to genuinely dissolve. Not just intellectually, but experientially.
And you're facing the really subtle stuff.
The final subtle layers of the sense of personal identity, the core contractions.
And that leads to the final stage, enlightenment.
Which is described as the complete dissolution of that separate self-sense. It's often not another big, flashy experience, but more a quiet recognition
Recognition of what?
that the freedom and peace you were seeking were actually always here, inherent in awareness itself. The seeking mechanism dissolves because there's nothing to seek and no one separate to seek it. Suffering, based on that false separation, ends.
Reality is just experienced directly, no filter.
Directly, as it is.
Wow, that sounds like quite a road. Dismantling your entire worldview stage by stage, the integration process must be full of challenges.
Oh, absolutely. The pitfalls after the initial awakening are numerous and significant.
What are the big ones people stumble into?
A huge one is ego expansion, the spiritual ego.
The mind tries to claim the awakening.
Exactly. The ego co-opts the experience and thinks, wow, I'm awake, I'm special, I'm more spiritual than others. It creates a new, subtly inflated identity.
Which completely undermines the whole point.
Totally. Humility gets lost. Another major one is isolation.
That makes sense, if your whole reality shifts.
How do you relate to friends, family, colleagues who are still operating from the old paradigm? It can be incredibly difficult, leading to feelings of deep loneliness.
You feel like nobody understands.
Right. And then there's the crucial need for emotional release.
We touched on this with the stages.
Yes. That initial opening often acts like popping a cork. Old wounds, traumas, unprocessed grief, anger, it can all come rushing to the surface, demanding attention, demanding healing.
Which can feel overwhelming.
Very destabilizing if you're not prepared or don't have support. It requires real grounding work. And finally, that loss of motivation we mentioned.
Falling into apathy because old goals feel pointless.
Exactly. Finding a new way to engage with life that isn't driven by egoic desires can take time and conscious effort.
Okay, so given all that, and given that enlightenment isn't something you can just achieve, like getting a degree, what are the practical steps? What can someone do if they've had that spark and want to sort of nurture the unfolding fire?
Yeah, the emphasis really shifts from achieving to allowing or nurturing conditions. First, seek guidance. Seriously.
Find a teacher, a community.
Yes, someone or some group that genuinely understands these stages, the pitfalls, the integration process. Having a wise guide can be invaluable for navigating the tricky terrain of dissolution. It's easy to get lost.
Okay. What else?
Second, really embrace daily life as practice. This isn't about retreating to a cave forever.
It happens right here.
Right here, every moment, every conversation, washing the dishes, dealing with traffic, it's all an opportunity to practice presence, to notice the mind, to choose awareness.
Make it practical.
Absolutely. Third, and this is huge, heal and integrate. Don't bypass the difficult stuff.
Therapy, shadow work, trauma release.
Whatever modalities resonate. You have to consciously work with the emotional blocks, the shadow material, the conditioning that gets unearthed. You can't just float above it in bliss, well, not for long usually. You integrate the shadow with the light.
That sounds crucial. And finally,
stay humble. This is so important. Remember, the end point isn't about the person becoming enlightened. The person, the separate self, is what dissolves.
so striving for personal glory, I want to be enlightened.
It's fundamentally counterproductive. It reinforces the very self that needs to be seen through. It's more about surrender than striving.
That's a key shift. We also need to tackle some common misunderstandings head on. The sources point out 4 major misconceptions that can really trip people up.
Yes, these are worth busting right now.
First one, awakening equals enlightenment. We've covered this, but it bears repeating.
Absolutely not the same for most people. Awakening is usually the powerful, often messy start of a much longer unfolding process, not the finish line.
Okay. Misconception number 2. Enlightenment means escaping life, like you become some detached zombie.
Right, this idea of floating above it all, uninvolved. The sources suggest true enlightenment isn't withdrawal from life, but full, compassionate, present participation in life.
But without the ego's fear and clinging running the show.
Exactly. Fully engaged, but free.
Third, awakening is always blissful.
Nope. While bliss is definitely a possible and wonderful side effect, the process of the self-dissolving often involves facing significant discomfort, grief, fear, confusion, loss. You have to be willing to meet all of it.
It's not just love and light.
Not always, no. And finally, misconception 4. Enlightenment belongs only to special people. Gurus, saints, monks, this idea that it's reserved for some spiritual elite. The sources emphasize this realization as inherent human potential. It's available to everyone, regardless of background, belief system.
Even atheists.
Even atheists. It's about seeing through the illusion of the separate self, which isn't dependent on believing in God or any particular dogma.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of this?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
I think the core message from this deep dive is pretty clear. Awakening is that moment of recognition, the glimpse, the spark. Enlightenment is the full, stable flowering of that spark, integrated into every aspect of life. It's the fire.
Well put. And if you have experienced that spark, that glimpse, see it for what it likely is. Not the end, but the beginning.
The start of a process.
A process that demands real patience, conscious integration, and ultimately a kind of surrender. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
And this leads us to a final, maybe slightly provocative thought to leave you with.
Okay.
Since the ultimate destination we've been discussing, enlightenment, is defined by the complete and permanent dissolution of the separate self, meaning the you that is currently listening, the you that might be striving for it, will actually cease to exist in that realization. What does that imply about the motivation behind the striving?
Yeah.
If the seeker themselves must vanish for the goal to be reached, what is it that's truly seeking? And what is it seeking for? Something to ponder.